There are some children who don't get the luxury of being children. While others are learning how to play, they are learning how to survive. While others worry about schoolwork, they worry about keeping the house together, keeping the peace, keeping their parents stable enough to make it through another day. These are the children who grow up too fast, not because they want to, but because life pushed them into adulthood long before they were ready. Behind their maturity is a story no one asks about. Behind their strength is a loneliness no one sees. And behind their silence is a child who never had the chance to be one. Today, we're going to explore the psychology of a child who grew up too fast, the unseen wounds, the hidden responsibilities, and the dark psychological patterns that shape them for the rest of their lives. A child who grows up too fast often carries responsibilities that their small hands were never meant to hold. This happens quietly, without warning, without anyone noticing the slow transformation happening inside them. One day, they wake up and realize they are the one remembering bills, managing chores, keeping peace in the house, comforting siblings, or even supporting a parent emotionally. They don't step into these roles because they want to become mature. They step into them because they sense the consequences of not doing so. When a child feels that everything around them might fall apart unless they take control, they begin to live like an adult, long before their brain is even fully formed. This child learns to scan the emotional environment constantly. They know exactly how their parent is feeling the moment they walk into the room, not because they're naturally intuitive, but because they've been trained by survival. They learn which tone of voice means trouble, which expression means a bad day is coming, which silence means danger. This emotional hyper-awareness is not a gift, it's a burden born from instability. And when a child grows up in a home where adults depend on them rather than the other way around, they begin to believe that being responsible is their duty, not their choice. They start taking care of tasks no one assigned them because they assume no one else will. They make their own meals, manage their homework alone, take care of younger siblings, or even calm down a distressed parent. Slowly, the child stops expecting help from anyone. They may not remember the moment their childhood shifted, but their body remembers the weight of responsibilities placed on them too early. This creates a psychological pattern where responsibility becomes tied to their identity. They feel valuable only when they are useful. They feel safe only when they are in control. And because of this, they grow up believing that resting is dangerous, that saying I need help is weakness, and that failure is not an option. They hold themselves to impossibly high standards because, as children, mistakes came with consequences they were too young to understand. They were not allowed to be irresponsible, emotional, loud, messy, or needy, the natural qualities of a child. So they learn to be calm, composed, efficient, and emotionally steady, the qualities of an adult who is always holding everything together. Even when they become older, the pattern does not disappear. They become the reliable one in every group, the friend who handles the crisis, the partner who manages the relationship, the employee who takes on more work than they should. People describe them as mature, stable, intelligent, old souls, unaware that these traits were shaped not by growth but by survival. Deep down, this child-turned adult still carries the fear that if they stop being responsible, everything will collapse. That fear is rooted in their earliest experiences, times when no one else could hold things together but them. And even though they are no longer a child, they still live with the subconscious belief that their worth depends on carrying weight that was never theirs to carry in the first place. Children who grow up too fast often learn very early that showing their pain is unsafe, unwelcome, or simply useless. They notice that when they cry, no one comes. When they complain, no one listens. When they express fear, frustration, or sadness, the adults around them are too overwhelmed to care. Or worse, the adults make the child feel guilty for having emotions at all. So the child begins to build a mask, a calm face, a strong posture, a mature attitude that hides everything happening inside. This mask becomes their shield, their identity, and eventually, their prison. At first, This emotional self-control may seem like maturity. People might praise them for being so composed or so well-behaved. Adults might admire their ability to stay calm in situations where other children would cry or panic. But what looks like strength on the outside is actually emotional suppression on the inside. The child learns not to cry because crying never helped. They learn not to ask for comfort because comfort never came. And they learn not to express needs because their needs were always ignored or treated as problems. Over time, the child becomes skilled at hiding their pain so effectively that even they start to believe the mask. They tell themselves, "I'm fine," even when they're hurting. They tell themselves, "I can handle it," even when they're overwhelmed. They convince themselves that feeling pain makes them weak, so they push it deeper and deeper until emotional numbness becomes their default state. This emotional armor keeps them functioning, but it also isolates them from their own vulnerability. What makes this so psychologically complex is that the child doesn't just hide their pain from the world, they hide it from themselves. They stop recognizing their own emotions. When something hurts them, they switch into fixing mode instead of feeling mode. If someone disappoints them, they stay quiet. If something scares them, they distract themselves. If they feel lonely, they bury themselves in responsibilities. Emotional needs become invisible, even to the child carrying them. As they grow into adulthood, this mask becomes heavier. They are the friend who listens to everyone's problems but never talks about their own. They are the partner who offers comfort but never asks for it. They are the coworker who works through stress without showing a single crack. People assume they are emotionally strong, stable, and unbreakable, but this assumption only reinforces their silence. No one thinks to check on the strong one, and so their pain continues to stay hidden. Inside, though, the fatigue grows. The emotional exhaustion piles up. They feel disconnected from others because no one knows their real self. They may struggle with relationships because they don't know how to express their feelings honestly. They crave love but feel unworthy of it. They want support but don't know how to ask for it. They are terrified of being seen as weak because weakness threatens the identity they built to survive childhood. So they keep pretending, they keep smiling, they keep holding everything in. And the world keeps believing the act, unaware that behind this mask of maturity is a child who once learned, painfully, that showing their hurt would never make anyone stay. A child who grows up too fast often develops a deep, unconscious belief that relying on someone else is dangerous. This belief doesn't appear suddenly. It forms slowly, shaped by years of disappointment, neglect, broken promises, and emotional instability from the adults around them. When a child reaches out for help and no one responds, their brain learns a painful lesson: you're on your own. When they look for comfort and instead find chaos, they learn another lesson: trust is risky. When they need reassurance but receive criticism or silence, they internalize, it's safer not to need anyone. Over time, this creates a psychological shift. The child's mind rewires itself for independence, not because it's empowering, but because they have no other choice. They learn to think ahead, solve problems on their own, and hide their fears, because asking for help has never been safe. This type of child becomes hyper-aware of their environment and begins predicting disappointment before it arrives. They stop expecting support because expecting something that never comes hurts more than expecting nothing at all. As they grow older, this emotional pattern hardens into a core belief: if I don't do it myself, it won't get done. This mindset becomes their shield, their armor, and their survival strategy. They start taking pride in doing things alone, even when it exhausts them. They refuse help even when they desperately need it. They see vulnerability as a threat rather than a human need. And by the time they reach adolescence or adulthood, independence becomes their entire identity. On the outside, these individuals are admired for being strong, capable, and self-reliant. People often say, "You're so good at handling things," or "You don't need anyone," unaware that these traits were born out of emotional scarcity, not confidence. The child never learned teamwork, interdependence, or mutual support. They only learned self-preservation. And while the world celebrates their independence, internally they feel isolated, misunderstood, and disconnected from others. Their inability to trust others doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from fear. A deep-rooted fear of disappointment, a fear of being let down the way they were as children, a fear of depending on someone who might disappear, break their trust, or prove unreliable. So instead of risking that pain again, they choose emotional isolation disguised as strength. In relationships, this becomes even more complicated. They may struggle to open up, share their emotions, or ask for simple support. When someone tries to get close, they pull away. Not because they don't care, but because closeness feels unsafe. They fear becoming a burden. They fear being abandoned. They fear needing someone who might not stay. So they stay silent, stay guarded, and stay independent, even when it hurts them. Deep inside, these individuals crave connection like anyone else. They long for understanding, affection, and emotional safety. But the child within them whispers, "It's not safe to trust. Don't let anyone close." And so, they continue to navigate life alone, wrapped in a protective armor that once saved them, but now quietly suffocates them. Healing begins not with forcing trust, but with understanding that their hyper-independence was never a flaw. It was their childhood's way of keeping them alive. A child who grows up too fast slowly loses touch with the simple joys of being young, often without even realizing it. Childhood is supposed to be full of exploration, curiosity, silliness, and carefree moments, but for these children, those experiences feel distant, almost foreign. Their environment doesn't allow them the emotional freedom to play, relax, or experiment without consequences. Instead of waking up excited for another day of imagination and discovery, they wake up preparing themselves for responsibility, stress, or conflict. The brain of a child was never meant to handle adult-level pressure, yet these children learn to adapt. And in the process, something precious gets taken away from them. This loss is not dramatic or sudden. It doesn't come with a single traumatic event. It happens quietly, slowly, one situation at a time. Maybe they had to watch a parent struggle and playtime didn't feel appropriate. Maybe they were scolded for being loud or acting childish. Maybe their home environment was unpredictable, so they learned to stay quiet, stay small, stay out of the way. Fun becomes a luxury they can't afford. Joy becomes a distraction that feels unsafe, and innocence, the most natural part of childhood, is replaced by a constant need to monitor, predict, and control what's happening around them. Instead of thinking about imaginary worlds, they think about real-world problems. Instead of enjoying their time with friends, they're worrying about what's waiting for them at home. Instead of expressing curiosity, they force themselves to be careful. Over time, this shifts their entire psychological development. The brain, when deprived of play and emotional freedom, becomes wired for survival mode. The child becomes more logical than spontaneous, more cautious than curious, more observant than expressive. They grow emotionally older, but remain emotionally hungry. As adults, these individuals often struggle with joy in subtle ways. They don't know how to relax without guilt. A simple day off might feel uncomfortable, like they're wasting time. Trying something new might feel risky, not exciting. Being silly or playful feels unnatural, even embarrassing. They may watch others laugh freely and feel confused, wondering how something so simple comes so easily to everyone else, but feels so distant to them. Social situations can also become difficult. Since they missed essential stages of emotional play, bonding, and light-hearted expression, they may feel out of place around people who grew up normally. They might appear serious, overly mature, or withdrawn. And although others think they're calm or collected, internally they often feel disconnected, unable to tap into the part of themselves that childhood should have developed: joy, spontaneity, and emotional ease. This stolen childhood also creates emotional deficiencies, especially in creativity and self-expression. Being imaginative requires freedom of mind, but these children rarely had that freedom. They learned to suppress their needs, their fantasies, their instincts. They learned to focus only on what was necessary, not what was fun. So when they grow older and try to reconnect with themselves, they sometimes find an emptiness where their childhood should have been. What hurts the most is the sense of missing something they can't fully describe. They see pictures of children laughing, running, or being silly, and it stings. Not because they envy the children, but because they know deep down that they never had that same freedom. Their inner child remains frozen, trapped in the role of someone who had to grow up long before they were meant to. And even as adults, they struggle to reclaim the joy that was taken from them. A joy that should have been the foundation of who they were allowed to become. A child who grows up too fast often becomes incredibly self-aware at an age when they should still be discovering themselves through curiosity, mistakes, and play. One of the deepest consequences of this rushed development is that they become hypersensitive to the emotions, tones, and reactions of the people around them. Instead of learning about their own feelings, they begin studying everyone else's. Their mind becomes a radar, constantly scanning for shifts in mood, signs of conflict, or anything that might require them to step in, adjust, or protect themselves. This emotional vigilance, which no child should have to develop, becomes their default way of living. Because they spend so much time monitoring others, they slowly lose the ability to understand their own emotional world. They can tell when someone else is angry, disappointed, upset, or stressed, but if someone asks them, "How do you feel?" they struggle. This disconnect is not because they don't have feelings, it's because they were never given the safety or freedom to explore them. Their emotional energy was invested outward, not inward. Their internal needs went unnoticed, unexpressed, or unvalued. Over time, they learned that analyzing others was more important than understanding themselves. This emotional hyper-awareness may look like empathy, but it's actually survival. They learned early that the smallest shift in someone's tone could mean danger, rejection, or conflict. So they became experts at reading micro-expressions, patterns, and behaviors. They can sense when someone is upset before the person even says anything. They can feel tension in the room like a physical weight. They adapt themselves instantly, becoming quieter, more helpful, or more invisible, whatever keeps the peace. But this constant self-adjustment comes at a cost. They lose themselves in the process. As adults, this habit becomes deeply ingrained. They continue to put others' emotions above their own. They become the therapist friend, the one everyone talks to, the one who listens, comforts, and understands. People admire their calmness and insight, but they don't realize that this skill came from years of emotional struggle, not natural talent. Inside, the person often feels exhausted. They want to talk about their own feelings but don't know where to start. They want to be understood, but they don't know how to let themselves be seen. Relationships become especially complicated. Because they were trained to anticipate others' needs, they often end up with partners who take advantage of their emotional labor. They give more than they receive. They apologize, even when they did nothing wrong. They feel responsible for fixing problems they didn't create, and when their own needs arise, they silence them out of fear of being too much, too emotional, or difficult. Their emotional world becomes a quiet, private place. They rarely let anyone inside. Deep down, there is often a longing, a quiet ache to feel known, understood, and emotionally safe. They dream of a connection where they don't have to read between the lines because everything is spoken openly and kindly. But the journey to that kind of connection starts with something they were never taught: turning inward, listening to their own emotions, and realizing that their feelings matter just as much as everyone else's.